Alright, as promised, this video is going to be us wiring our two other motors together and trying to get all three of our motors working in tandem in a single program. So I'm going to start by wiring together the last couple motors. If you remember, this was a pretty easy thing to do. I'm just going to make sure that I put these two motors on the groups of pins that are numbered 10 and 11. So, of course, you don't necessarily need to have them in the exact same number groups as I do. I just like having 9, 10, and 11 as my three motors. And then just recall that the orange wire needs to be facing upwards as you do this. So you'll go right there. That's number 10. And then this one is number 11. So just like that. So let's go ahead and move on to Arduino. So here back in Arduino, right where we left off last week, and we have our two other motors in pins number 10 and pins number 11. Now the first thing I'd like to do is just figure out which pin will activate which motor. So we can very simply do that just by changing our pin numbers here. I'm going to go ahead and change both of them so I can see continuous motion, like back and forth motion from the motor that I'm interested in. So looking at pin 10, what is it going to give us? So it looks like pin 10 is the head. Okay, so pin 10 is the head. Fantastic. All right. And then we'll also test pin 11. Although I'm pretty sure we know which one by process of elimination pin 11 is. Let's just make sure it's working. All right. So pin 11 is the left arm. And now I'm going to go ahead and just upload blank code real quick so it stops making noise for the time being. All right, cool. Now let's say I want to get all of the motors moving in a single code. That should be fairly simple to do. And let's just kind of keep in mind what we have here, where we have pairs of servo blocks. We have two servo blocks that say the same pin number, so they're using the same motor, but they're going to two different angles. And so if I have three motors, which I want to do that for, if I have three motors that I want moving back and forth, I'm going to need 6 servo pins, and I'm going to need each motor to have a pair of servo blocks that are referring to that. So I'm going to need 2 that say pin number 11, 2 that say pin number 10, and 2 that say pin number 9. So I'm going to go ahead and just simply clone all this. So these all say 11 at the moment. I'm going to change these 2 to say pin 10. So I have 2 that say 10, 2 that say 11, and I'm going to add 2 more that say 9. So this is going to say 9. This is also going to say 9. And this should get all 3 of my motors working one at a time. Any minute now. So there you have it. There is all 3 of the motors working. Now you may be saying to yourself, that's great, but what if I want all 3 of the motors moving at the same time? All right, that's actually also doable. So I am going to get rid of a few of these weight blocks, because it turns out we're only going to need 2. So I'm going to organize my servo blocks once again. So I've got my 2 pin 9s over here. I've got my 2 pin 10s right here. And then I've got my 2 pin 11s right here. Okay, great. So if I want to move all of my motors at the same time, I need to remember what the wait block is ultimately doing. So the wait block is going to wait for any other commands to happen. So if I put, say, 3 servo blocks before a single wait, all 3 of those servo blocks are going to happen more or less simultaneously. They're going to happen at, for your eyes and my eyes, at the same time. So what I want to do is I want to put 3 servo blocks before a single wait block. But I need to be careful about how I do this. So for example, if I put 2 pin 9 blocks before a single wait block, I am telling one motor to do 2 things at the same time. And that's problematic. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I have my 3 servo blocks before that single wait be for the 3 different motors. So each motor is only getting 1 command at a time. So I want pin 9 to get a command. I want pin 10 to get a command. And I want pin 11 to get a command, all roughly at the same time. Our robot can handle that pretty well. What it couldn't handle is if I had pin 9 going to 2 different places at the same time, roughly. So I have pin 9, pin 10, pin 11, and then wait. So I'm allowing all 3 of these 1 second to happen. And I'm going to do the same for my other 3. So I have pins 9, 10, and 11 separated like that. So notice I have 2 groups, more or less. I have one group that has all 3 of my motors represented. And then I have another group with all 3 of my motors represented. So I've split up the motion still. Let's try this. There we go. Get it to stop. All right, cool. So that's all 3 of your motors working. Now you can of course do this in groups of 2 motors moving. That one you'll have to keep even closer track of. Where are your particular servo blocks? Are you putting any 2 that are the same motor together? Are you making sure that you have each motor going from one place to another instead of accidentally going to the same place twice? For something along those lines, if you were trying to only move 2 motors at the same time, you'd have to pay pretty close attention to what you're doing. Before I let you go, because this is like the last of the sort of main sequence of videos, you may see more in the future that are, you know, letting you or helping you go further beyond, but this is probably the last of the main sequence videos. And I want to say, you know, thank you for joining us in this journey. I hope that you learned something about robotics. Let's see. Oh, before I forget, I guess I probably should have done that outro after this, but you know, whatever. Something that you may want to keep in mind about your motors is they use a lot more power than your other components on your robot. So they use a lot more than your LEDs or your buzzer, and because of that, doing something like this where you have all 3 motors moving at once can draw a lot of power from the battery. So if your battery is weak, you may notice that you have not so great performance when compared to when you have it plugged into the computer. So that's something just to keep in mind. All right, so like I was saying, thank you for joining us. I hope you had fun. I had fun doing these videos, and I hope you guys continue your robotics adventure into the future. All right, bye.